Okay, so I've been in the hobby for over 5 years. I have heard over 500 IEMs, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the 5 IEMs that have basically blown me away, and it sort of changed the way that I thought about the hobby. Now, yes, these IEMs that I'm going to be talking about today, they are endgame IEMs. They are quite expensive, and while there are a lot of IEMs that have blown me away in terms of their price to performance, the fact of the matter is that, good for the price is something that changes very quickly, whereas something like endgame sound is something that stands the test of time. And these are IEMs that I think are relevant now and that will still be relevant in a few years. And, I kind of just want to set up this video to be relevant as well when someone else like you watches it a couple years down the road. So at the top of my list is obviously going to be the Subtonic Storm. And I first heard this in April of 2022 in Singapore, back when it was still just a little prototype in a plastic shell, and it was quite jank at that time. But just from that moment, I knew that IEM was special. And ever since then, it has been an IEM that I consistently listen to at every audio show that I go to. The only reason why I don't own one myself is that, well, I'm just broke like that, and I don't have I think it's like 6.5 grand to drop on an IEM right now. But yeah, if I could, I would own this IEM. So at a high level, this is kind of the king of reference, but at the same time, it's kind of not. So it's based very heavily off of the Genelec studio monitors, which are some of the flattest studio monitors in the pro audio world. But what really sets this IEM apart is its treble response. So when it comes to the treble response of the Storm, it uses a series of crossovers to get this very unique jaggedness to its treble response that's very similar to how studio monitors actually measure. So they don't actually measure, like dead flat studio monitors, but they tend to have like a very tiny little jaggedness to them in the treble response. And the Storm basically mimics this. So there's really nothing like the Storm on the market when it comes to its treble response. Yes, there are IEMs that maybe measure similar on paper, but they're really never going to sound the same or even come close just because of the granularity of the information that's stored in the treble response. There's a lot more information in there than there are other parts of the frequency response. Now, I did say that the Storm is referenced, but it's also kind of not. And the reason for this is that I think that there are subtle colorations to its, jaggedness in the treble response that kind of actually elevate it over a, standard Genelec monitor like the ones that I have. I think I have like the 8030s, 8030Cs or the 8020Cs is what I have, I think. But yeah, I definitely think that the Storm sounds more detailed than those monitors. And another reason for this, of course, is that, IEMs just present everything closer to you. So really the Storm is probably, I think, one of the most detailed IEMs that I've heard, if not the most detailed IEM that I've heard so far. On a more objective level, looking at its bass, its mid-range, its treble, its technical performance, and just breaking everything down. If I had to break everything down, I would say that this is objectively the best IEM in the world at this time. And it kind of has been for the last 3 years. Now, in terms of weaknesses, it does have one minor weakness, I think, which is its treble extension past 16K hertz. Really not relevant for most listeners because most listeners cannot hear much past that. But the extension on it is slightly worse than, say, studio monitors or even the Symphonium Helios. Okay, moving on, at number 2 is going to be the Elysian Annihilator. So the way I think I first heard this is that someone was sending me their IEMs for review, and they told me that they included a surprise. And bear in mind, at this point in time, the Elysian brand was very obscure. Almost no one was getting their hands on Elysian's IEMs in the USA. And this surprise, though, again, turned out to be the Elysian Annihilator, the 2021 model. So there are actually 3 models of the Annihilator. There's the 2019, the 2021, and then the 2023. The 2021, I think, is probably the most resolving of the 3 models, whereas the 2023, the latest one that I have, is a bit more balanced and it's a bit more easy to listen to over longer periods of time. Now, with that being said, if the Storm is more of a reference IEM that's uncolored, this is kind of the king of coloration. It's definitely more of a U-shaped IEM where the sub-bass and the upper treble are boosted accordingly. And the real standout of this IEM, though, is its treble response. Even like 5 years later, after the release of the electrostatic drivers, I would say that the Annihilator probably has one of, or if not the best implementations of it still. The best way that I can kind of describe it is that, it's like you strapped butterfly wings on treble notes and then they got hit with lightning. treble on this IEM just sounds really, really exceptional, and it just sounds like there's something magical, ethereal behind it. It's not going to be for everyone, not everyone likes color, not everyone likes an unnatural sound. But when it comes to like the execution of this sound, I really do think that the Annihilator is probably one of the best IEMs for that type of sound. Okay, coming in at number 3 is the Bryce Audio Fugaku. This is more of a recent entry that I heard, I think, in the last year, maybe year and a half. But yeah, when I first saw this IEM, I honestly expected it to be a bit of a meme. It kind of just reminded me of that audiophile dude on I think it's like some train in Tokyo or something, or some train in Asia. And he's got his like, whole portable setup strapped up to this huge ass stack of, DAC amps and whatnot. Because yeah, this is kind of similar. It's got this huge setup that you have to bring around with it. It's quite cumbersome. But when it comes to the actual sound, the bass on this, oh my gosh. I really do think that this is probably the IEM with the best bass in the world. So ultimately, when it comes to, bass performance, there's kind of this balance that needs to be struck between, the amount of depth that a note can hit with and the speed of that note perceptively. And when it comes to kind of this balance, I would say that the Fugaku basically hits the optimal point where those qualities kind of meet. It's incredibly fast. The bass, it never sounds like, it smears or anything like that. And then at the same time, when notes hit, they hit incredibly hard. They sink very, very deeply. With that being said, definitely not the IEM for you in the bass if you're, looking for an IEM that has more bloom to the bass notes, where they sort of fade out a bit slower. Most other parts of this IEM, I would say, are pretty unremarkable, if only kind of by virtue of how great the bass is. I would say that the mid-range and treble, they're loosely reminiscent of the Elysian Annihilator. It's just that the Annihilator kind of does the treble better. And the mid-range on the Fugaku, I think, is a bit more forward compared to the 2023 Annihilator. Now, would I actually buy this IEM? Definitely not. It's $16,000. It's literally one of the most expensive IEMs in the world. And I could think of a lot of things that I would rather spend that type of money on. With that being said, I definitely think that this is an IEM that is worth hearing, just so you know what world-class bass sounds like. And hey, maybe if you are a much richer man than myself, I could definitely see this being a purchase consideration. Okay, coming in at number 4 is going to be the 64 Audio Tia Trio. And, I love a lot of the 64 Audio IEMs. I am kind of like probably one of their most die-hard fans, honestly. Like, the U12T was probably one of my first loves in IEMs. I love that IEM, and I listened to it religiously for like 3 or 4 years. With that being said, when it comes to like wow factor, I think that the Tia Trio is the one that takes the cake for me. So what makes the Tia Trio so special? One is just its bass response, the bass response on it. It's not to the level of the Fugaku, and it's a different type of bass response. You know how I said the Fugaku is very quick and it slams very hard? The Tia Trio is more of a enriching experience where, bass notes, they hit a little bit slower and there's a little bit of softness to that initial note attack. At the same time, though, the notes sound incredibly like rich and dense, and they just sound like they're filled out. I'm not really sure how I can put it. It's just a different experience. It's like you're taking a bite of like rich dark chocolate. The other big standout of this IEM is its imaging performance. So with the Tia Trio, like the soundstage, the way notes gather on the stage, it sounds like they're popping out of your head just by a few inches, and that's really, really exceptional for an IEM. And the reason why this phenomenon occurs on the Tia Trio is the way it's been uniquely tuned. So it kind of has a notch at 1K hertz, and then it has a lot of upper treble energy. So it's a very airy sounding IEM, and this just makes notes sort of like float around the sound stage. One other thing I think is that, that notch at 1K hertz, it does influence the bass response, and it gives it just a little bit more depth. Similar to the notch that you would hear, that's a lot easier to hear at 200 hertz on a lot of Harman-tuned IEMs. So yeah, when it comes to the Tia Trio, there's basically no other IEM on the market that's tuned like it still. And bear in mind, this IEM came out in like, holy shit, I think it came out in 2018. So it's like a 7-year-old IEM. And I think it still holds its own today. I don't think 64 Audio has ever raised the price on the IEM. And that's kind of the reason why, like, when you account for inflation, I think that, it's still a very expensive IEM, but at the same time, it's not insanely overpriced. And I think it's definitely a worthy purchase consideration. Okay, coming in at number 5 is the Symphonium Helios. So the best way of thinking of this IEM is like a supercharged high edition Viento B, which is that, legendary 4 balanced armature IM that came from South Korea and is still being produced today. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of the Viento B, especially in the universal format. I think the CIM would be different. But the Helios basically gave me everything that I wanted from the universal and much more. So this IM is pretty much dead neutral with bass boost. The treble response on it is actually very, very good. It's like dead flat and it extends up to like 18k hertz, maybe even further than I can hear personally. So compared to the Storm, which actually shares a lot of the same kind of like DNA, like the same creators behind the IMs, the Helios actually has more extension in the upper treble than the Storm, and it's not, like subtly colored like the Storm is. The listening experience of the Helios is definitely very reference-like with that, hard attack transients and that crisp decay that you would hear off of studio monitors as well. This IM was so good that when I heard it, I instantly bought it in 30 minutes without even like really thinking anything else through. Now, I did eventually sell this IM, and the reason for that is the fit. The fit on the Helios is actually atrocious. It's a very large IM, and the shells, the nozzles, are like elongated to get that treble extension. So that's definitely something that you have to watch out for, if you are considering purchasing this IM. So this IM came out in the same generation as the The Audio Monarch Mark II, which was probably one of the most other solid options at the time. And I suspect that the Monarch Mark II, sold way more volume than the Symphonium Helios ever did. And I don't blame, listeners for buying the Monarch Mark II over the Helios, because the fit on the Helios, again, is just not optimal by any stretch of the imagination. However, when it comes to, pure sound quality, I think that the Helios was, the best IM at its time for $1,000. And I still think for $1,000, it's still probably the best IM at its price point. Okay, so I did say that I was going to be talking about IMs to blow me away, and I thought I would throw in an honorable mention for the IMs that blew me away in the worst way possible. And so these IMs are called the Metal Magic Research IMs, or MMR for short, and I heard these about like a year into the hobby and when I was reviewing IMs. So these IMs, they costed around like $3,000 or $4,000, and quite frankly, they sounded fucking awful. Like, they literally sounded like you were underwater, and they were, even at that time, they were like $30 or $40 IMs that sounded better than these IMs. And this was like a changing point for me, because I realized that like, at this point that like, money really had no bearing on sound quality. Like, there are a lot of IMs out there that are just extremely expensive and extremely poor sounding. So I actually looked up this company recently, and I think their IMs were literally so bad that like they don't even exist anymore, and you can't even buy them anymore. If that says anything about how their products sounded. But yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, learning about some of these IMs that I personally think, after many years, hundreds of IMs that I think are worth listening to. And I really do hope that you guys are able to get your ears on these, just so you can share your thoughts with me as well and how these IMs stack up for you. And yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Peace out until next time.